All right, let's get into it. We are going to be talking about how to be a good peer critiquer today. So first I want to go over briefly this sheet, and then we will look at a sample essay and kind of how you could give feedback on your peers' papers. So before we get into kind of what the process will look like for you guys individually, I'm just going to show you the sheet real quick. So it's broken down into 4 categories, right? We're going to first look at a focused explanation. How is their focus throughout their paper? And then a clear logical organization. Do they organize things in a logical way? Is it clear? Does it make sense as it goes? Is there any place where you get tripped up? Are they using strategies that make sense for their concept that they're trying to explain? Or are there strategies maybe they haven't considered that would help explain it a little more clearly? And then last but not least, how do they integrate their sources? Are they introducing them? Are they kind of giving a little background? Or are they just kind of dropping it in and not giving any explanation of where it's coming from? So that's kind of the broad overview of the critique guide. But before you get to that, some key points that I want you guys to consider. First of all, once you have a peer who you know you're going to be critiquing their essay and they've shared their essay with you, whether that's on paper or digitally, the first thing you're going to do is read it through once without making any comments, without writing anything down, without even looking at the sheet, right? You are just going to read their essay, um, and that way you have kind of a background, a starting point, okay? Once you have done that, then I want you to focus on one block of this critique guide at a time. So first you're going to look at a focused explanation. What is the explanation? Then you're going to look at their organization. How did they organize it? Then you're going to talk about, okay, what strategies did they use to make it make sense? And then lastly, how did they integrate their sources? All right, now you don't necessarily have to do these in order, but just a tip, I guess. Looking at this sample essay as an example of how to critique an essay. Now, I want you to take into consideration these are not all of the comments that you can make as a peer reviewer. We are just going to be breaking down the parts of that critique one by one, and giving sample comments so you can kind of see the expectations. Now, these are what you should expect from your peers, not from your teacher. So keep in mind, when I am looking at a zero draft, I am going to be giving big picture comments. So I'm not going to be pointing out little things like, oh, you spelled this word wrong, or you put your period in the wrong place after an in-text citation, right? Those are things that you or your peers should be catching. So keeping that in mind, the first thing that we're looking at here is, remember, the focused explanation. So I'm going to read, now at this point, we're going to pretend, I guess, that we've already read through the entire essay in and of itself, right? So the first thing we're going to do is make a comment on what we think the focus of the essay is. So since you have not read this whole essay, I will go ahead and make this kind of one sentence comment myself. So you can either do this, like maybe you're going to want to just highlight the title of the essay. All right, so once you have highlighted the title, then you can just put in your one sentence kind of here is what this essay is about, right? So I'm going to paste in my comment because I've already made it. So after reading the whole essay once through, and then I'm going to read through it a little more closely so I can make a good comment, right? So this essay explains abortion, defining it as both a medical procedure with distinct methods and a complex social issue, obviously, highlighting why understanding these aspects is crucial for making informed decisions. So that addresses both what I guess the overall focus of the essay is and why it's important. So that's so what. So it's doing both of those in one sentence. Then we're just going to make that comment, right? All right. So next we are going to look at, once we've given very simple breakdown of the focus of what the essay is, then we're going to focus on praise. And this happens in every single step of the peer critique process. So you're first going to do one thing, then you're going to praise, then you're going to critique. Okay. So after reading the whole thing through twice at this point, now I'm going to give them some praise. So the praise that I have is about medical procedures, but more specifically, I have a comment about the abortion pills. So I'm going to highlight that word. I'm going to go ahead and paste my comment in right here. So what I liked was the detailed breakdown of what the procedures are, but especially the clear explanation, of the abortion pill and kind of the side effects that it could have. And the reason, so I'm not only praising that, but I'm also saying I think it's going to help readers who are curious about the actual realities behind this debate, right? Because a lot of people, when it comes to this issue specifically, are really only I guess, educated about one type or don't know about all of them, all facets of the issue. So make that comment right there. So then next, we're going to focus on critiquing. All right, so critiquing the focus. So my critique really has to do with kind of a transition here between the talk of the medical part to the talk of ethical, moral kind of dilemmas. So because that kind of happens right here, so they go from small risk to your uterus, cervix, and other organs to kind of how someone, excuse me, goes about making the decision to get an abortion, right? So I'm going to highlight just the beginning of this sentence because that's kind of where I feel like it gets pretty abrupt. So I'm going to highlight here, make a comment, I'm going to paste in the comment that I have. So while the explanation that they have is really thorough, what bothers me right now, or what I think they could improve, right? That's the critique part of it, is the transition from this medical discussion up here to where it gets to be like ethical, moral, etc. So that's why I kind of have the comment right here. So I found the transition from the medical description to the discussion of ethical and legal implications a little bit abrupt. It happens just pretty suddenly. So then I'm going to give a suggestion. What do I think that they could do to improve that, right? So if you could clarify how these medical details directly influence this bigger debate, and then I give an example, like maybe you could add a sentence that links the procedure's risks to ethical decisions. You know, what is an ethical decision? Maybe that's something that they're going to want to define. Then that could make the concept of abortion, since that's the concept that they're talking about, and that importance and understanding of that concept clearer to the audience. All right. The next part of your critique is kind of a broad overview where you're going to look at the organization. So ideally, what you are going to do for your peer is you're going to just give them, this can be bullet point. I'm going to show you, I've done it in kind of a numerical pattern, but you're just going to break down really simply, like if you were to write in the margin of their paper, how did they organize it point by point, right? And we're not getting into the nitty gritty, we're just giving them a broad overview. So as I scroll through here, I can see that after their intro, right? So start with their first body paragraph. So their first body paragraph is kind of about the medical process. So they're going to go through, they talk about both the medical options, I guess, when it comes to abortion. So both pills and surgical. Then they talk about advantages and disadvantages of those different options. Then they talk about what is it that causes someone to make a decision to get an abortion. So like, what are the reasons that people have abortions? So that's kind of a complex double paragraph there. Then they talk about the history of abortion over time, specifically in the United States. Then they talk about the current status of abortion. So what does it look like now? What are the current laws and statistics, right? So that's a broad overview. So I might make that comment, gosh, let's just say we're going to have it here in the last paragraph. So, well, no, I think I'm going to do it up here. Let's see. We're going to go back up and we're going to put it, you can really do this wherever, guys, it doesn't matter. Okay, I'm going to put it at the end of the first paragraph since it's kind of, that's where I'm starting the process. So here is what I have come up with. 1, they talked about the intro to abortion. 2, So this just kind of defines and gives a very broad overview. 2, they talk about the medical procedures overview, pills, surgical. 3, they talk about the pros and cons. Then they talk about the reasons abortions are sought and the history of abortion in the US and its current status. And then obviously they have a conclusion, okay? So that just shows that, okay, this is what I see as the outline of your paper. Now we're going to give praise in terms of organization. So we're looking at the bigger picture here, all right? So I think I'm going to make this one kind of directly after that first comment. All right, where's my comment button? Okay, so my praise overall for the organization of this one is that they're very specifically um, separating like the technical definitions from the ethical discussions, right? So they separate that technical explanation of what abortion is from the discussion of those ethical, legal, and just personal factors why people would seek out an abortion, for example. So one of the examples I gave was there's a very clear division between the detailed description of different methods, right? And then later, they don't at all, and I say this here at the very end, they're never mixing up their topics, right? If abortion is the process of medically ending a pregnancy, the whole paragraph is focused on that. They're never going to anything else. So the focus is very clear, paragraph by paragraph. So while that is my praise, the next thing that I'm going to focus on is what do I think they could do better in terms of organization? And what I'm focusing on for this specific essay is that I think that they could transition a little bit more clearly. So let me show you an example of what that could look like. So like I said, my biggest critique for this essay in terms of their focus and their organization has to do with transitions. So I'm going to show you that in a couple places. So if we go to the end of this first kind of body paragraph, they go from some light bleeding will be expected for up to a week, then they've got their citation, and well, we'll come back to that later. And then they kind of say it's important to know the methods used for abortion so patients can make informed decisions, et cetera, right? Now, I want you to keep that sentence in mind, and then we're going to go down to this transition sentence in the next body paragraph. So this one said, it's important to know the methods used for abortion so patients can make an informed decision. Down here, knowing the positive and negative aspects of both options is important to know when seeking an abortion. So one of my biggest critiques here is that their transition sentences at the ends of both paragraphs, at least in these two paragraphs, look very similar. So maybe they want to add, excuse me, a little more variety. When I see things like this, phrases that are repeated, I like to highlight them, especially if they're ones that I don't think help the essay. So I'll highlight, and I'm going to encourage you to do the same. If you see things when you are peer reviewing that you think just need to be redone, highlight or make comments. So I'm going to highlight important to know in both of these transition sentences because I just think there's a better way to do them. And the other thing I'm going to highlight in this particular sentence, whoops, is knowing, because they have knowing and then important to know in the same sentence, which I think that could be done better. All right. I'm going to add our comment. So I'm going to click right here and add my comment. So while I think their overall structure is logical, the transitions are where I think they need to add some variety and make them a little more smooth. So I talked about I would not only work on varying the way you transition from each paragraph, and that's where I've highlighted here, but also make sure that they include discussion after in-text citations. Why is that information important and relevant to the discussion, right? And I put this one here because here is where like they talk about there is also a small risk of injury to your uterus, cervix, or other organs. And then they cite, but they don't really discuss it after the fact, right? So we're going to make that comment just so that they kind of know right there. Now, a great thing for you to do as a peer reviewer is add in, okay, one way I think you could transition, I don't think I can think and type at the same time. Could transition, sorry, is, and then give them a sample sentence. Now, this isn't to say they're going to use it, but at least you've given them an idea of another way that they can transition from paragraph to paragraph. All right, this recording is going to cut me off, so I might make another one for the last part of the essay.